The stated expectation of game franchises is that with each title, they will develop and get better. Whether or not that's exactly what we expect, not necessarily what I'm saying, but in theory, as a team gains experience and tries new things, it should get better, right? Well, that's not always what happens, is it? Normally, the process of evolution brings us bigger and better and smarter, but in the case of these games, it does the exact opposite. Hi folks, it's Falcon, and today on Game Ranks, 10 game franchises that evolved backwards. Starting off with number 10, it's Battlefield. This is a franchise that's just an endless series of taking steps forward and backwards. For most of its lifespan, it was 2 steps forward, 1 step back. But in recent years, it's been more like a half step forward and then 3 leaps back, especially after the launch of Battlefield 2042. I'm aware the game has improved over the years, and it's not the total disaster it was back in 2021, but it's missing a lot of significant features from previous games in the series. While they did eventually bring back classes, a lot of movement abilities are still DOA. There's no single-player campaign, and the destruction is severely reduced compared to how spectacular those effects were in Battlefield 5. The last one really stings because destruction, at least to me, is an essential part of the identity of the Battlefield franchise. The size and malleability of the maps is what makes the game so dynamic and interesting, so essentially losing all that with 2042 is extremely disappointing. Hopefully, whenever the next Battlefield comes out, they'll listen to fans and make a game that actually moves the franchise forward instead of just trying to copy other popular games like Apex Legends or Call of Duty Warzone. Battlefield shouldn't have to copy other franchises to succeed.
All landfill victors maintain advance. Scan and identify.
And number 9 is the Far Cry series. For some fans, it's been downhill since Far Cry 4. That game may not have landed for everyone, but it took big, bold swings and introduced a lot of interesting and innovative ideas that were expanded on in later games. A lot of the more simulation-inspired elements of Far Cry 2 still exist to some degree in the games, but they've slowly been diminishing to the point of irrelevance. In 2, one could spark cloud burn down an entire savanna. Fire would spread dangerously quickly, trees would burn to a crisp, and it'd be dynamic and realistic. Now, in recent games, fires spread, but they go out on their own just as quickly. Nothing burns, at least not in the same way. Environmental destruction is certainly less impressive overall. The whole dynamic ally system in 2 never appeared again either. The diegetic way you do things like read maps was also cut, replaced with more traditional map screens. It's not all necessarily a step in the wrong direction. I think pretty much every normal metric would indicate Far Cry 3 is a better game than 2. People tend to minimize or overlook 2's many glaring issues, but the stuff that's impressive is just legitimately really good. It would have been nice if the developers of future games at least attempted to further explore some of the more simulation-like concepts. Instead of feeling like you're in a living, breathing world like in Far Cry 2, the worlds of later games like 5 and 6 feel more like amusement parks. You can look, but you can't touch. And number 8 is Dead Rising. While Dead Rising 2 was mostly a straight evolution for the series, introducing weapon combos and adding an additional ticking clock of having to find infection-suppressing Zombrex on top of all the other plates you need to keep spinning, the next games in the series slowly started to strip away the things that make them unique. First was Dead Rising 3, which severely downplayed time limits and expanded the map to a full open world, removing the smaller, more intimate focus of the first couple of games. Didn't quite sit right, but at least there was still the occasional psycho, even if the tone of the game was a little off compared to the first 2. With the final game, Dead Rising 4, the series was well and truly, dead. On its own, it's not the worst game, but everything that makes a Dead Rising game has been stripped out. There's no longer a time limit at all, there's no time crunch, so the challenge the zombies could provide was mostly gone, which made the game really easy. Even if you hated the time limit and you were glad it was gone, nobody was happy about the removal of the psychos either. These were cinematic bosses, and a lot of them were the most memorable characters or moments in the series.
this, loser.
They are an essential part of a Dead Rising game, and they're just not in the fourth one. It makes it feel like a huge downgrade compared to the rest of the games. Like, all the quirkiness and personality of the series was just gone. It was just another generic open-world zombie game with very little to make it stand out. At least the recent Dead Rising 1 remake was a return to form, because it's literally an identical redo of the first, almost identical redo of the first game. Hopefully the success that Capcom got from it prompts them to make a proper follow-up that embraces the parts of these games that make them memorable and unique. And number 7 is Red Faction, a series that hit its apex with the third game. We talk about it all the time. You know it. It's Red Faction Guerrilla. But that wasn't the end of the franchise. There was still one game. Well, technically 2. There was an Xbox Live arcade indie game as well. But the actual sequel was a game called Red Faction Armageddon. It did manage to evolve the formula in at least one way by introducing the ability to not just destroy, but also repair, which was a worthwhile addition, but that's the only thing particularly memorable about it, because otherwise it is a severe downgrade from Guerrilla in every possible way.
The area has sustained a significant amount of damage.
Guerrilla was an open world game with a whole lot going on. The destruction was closely integrated with everything you're doing in the game as well. Blowing up enemy bases, weakened their control over sectors. It slowed down the response rate. There was all kind of vehicles and weapons to use, or mechs. A lot of different mission types that mixed things up. It was a game that you were always doing something different, and it rarely got repetitive or boring because the focus was on destroying stuff, and there was a ton to do. Armageddon dumped the open world, and with it, most of the vehicles and variety of challenges. No more destruction challenges that were clever little puzzles that had you figure out how to destroy something with a limited amount of tools. There wasn't any more smashing into buildings with vehicles or making impromptu shortcuts. You just walked forward and shot everything that moves. And sometimes stuff breaks, which I guess kind of mixes things up a bit. Not a lot, though. It's not a terrible game or anything, but it just feels like such a regression after Guerrilla. A proper sequel would have given us a bigger world that was more dense with more stuff to do, maybe a more complex physics model, but instead they made a streamlined and simplified version of parts of Red Faction where you're not even fighting human enemies most of the time. You're taking on brainless swarms of bugs that aren't as much fun to fight and take all the tactical depth out of the destructible environments. If nobody's taking cover, what's the point of blowing up a wall? It was just a wrong direction to take the franchise in, and a poor follow-up to Guerrilla. And number 6 is Monster Hunter. This one's going to be a little controversial, but at least among fans, there are people who believe the most recent Monster Hunter game, Wilds, went a little too far with the streamlining. From World onward, the series has been simplifying things and removing features from the old games that does make them more accessible, and for the most part, people have received these changes pretty well. But the sweeping changes for the formula in Wilds, for some, was a step too far. I am not saying that Wilds didn't evolve at all, because it did introduce some new ideas like monster herds and weather changes.
My whiskers are tingling. Weather's changing.
But at the same time, it did remove other features that encouraged exploration and made combat a little more complex and challenging. Like, you can't set Palico strategies anymore. It used to be that you could tell your Palico what you want them to do in a fight. Like, you could tell them you want them to heal you or focus on getting extra resources, laying traps. Now, Palicos just do everything, which simplifies what you have to worry about during a fight. Status ailments are barely a concern, because your Palico heals them as quickly as you get them. But is that good? The most controversial change is the secrets, which now move automatically. They're basically a personal taxi service. You no longer need to explore or figure out where a monster went. They'll just take you there automatically. Exploration in general has been streamlined in Wilds. There's basically barely any reason to do it anymore other than to unlock camps. All the resources are marked on your map automatically. Monsters can just be found. There's no real hunt anymore. It's also simple, it feels almost frictionless. When you get into the game and hunt some monsters, like it's great to get past all the roadblocks and get on with the monster fighting, but it does remove one of the central aspects of these games, which is the hunting part. With Wilds, it feels more like a boss rush game than a monster hunting game. At this point, Geralt puts in more work hunting monsters, and that's just a secondary part of the Witcher games. There's plenty of people perfectly happy with the changes Wilds made to the formula, but it's controversial. Longtime fans or people who want a more in-depth experience don't feel like Wilds is it. And number 5 is Dragon Age. This is a franchise that's really had its ups and downs, but for anyone who's been with the series since the start, it's felt like it's been downhill since 2011. They were already streamlining things and simplifying stuff like combat and role-playing elements as early as the first sequel. The Origins system was just removed, and the choices and options given to the player were much more limited overall. At least they introduced the idea that you could be friends or rivals with your companions, where you get benefits when your party members like you and when they hate you, which is a concept I like. You don't always have to suck up to your allies with this system. If you don't like them, you can say it, and you aren't automatically punished for it. Inquisition was a much bigger and better game than Dragon Age 2, but quests did have less depth, and the MMO-like combat system was a far cry from the tactical real-time combat offered by the first game. Finally, with Veilguard, the de-evolution of the series was complete, with extremely simplified party mechanics, hack-and-slash combat, small and mostly linear locations. The series is basically unrecognizable. Went from a complex CRPG to an action game with some RPG elements that remind you, yes, it's a Dragon Age game, still, inexplicably. I mean, it could have gone a lot worse. Before the pivot back to single player, this was gonna be a live service game with even more casual mechanics, so at least it didn't turn into that. But what we got was pretty far from the series' origins as a gritty Baldur's Gate throwback. If they took the Dragon Age name off Veilguard and made the dialogue less embarrassingly lame, I think the final entry would probably be viewed more favorably, but it's got Dragon Age in the name, so it's hard not to compare it to the original, and wow, does the fourth come up wanting in that respect. Like, if your expectation is a complex CRPG with a bunch of branching story stuff and complex combat systems, etc., this ain't it. It's not even like it couldn't have been. Like, again, like, this is probably a Gotham Knights situation. They definitely made it to be a live service game and decided that was a bad idea. Correctly so, but, I mean, you can only go so far walking a move back.
Get ready. Gunspawn. Take him down.
At number 4 is Mortal Kombat. As of this writing, it's hard not to see Mortal Kombat 11 as the apex of the series. It's got the most features, the most modes, and a huge selection of characters to pick from. Mortal Kombat 1, it's missing a few things, to put it mildly. The roster's smaller, it's got too many guest characters. Seriously, it's got Homelander and Omni-Man. Do we really need 2 evil Supermen, whatever, in this game? Do we need 2 of them? That's the least of the game's problems, though. They took out custom movesets. They replaced the costume pieces that you used to be able to use to customize characters. The crypt is gone. It's replaced with the inferior and tedious invasions mode. And while cameo fighters are meant to fill in for removed movesets, they just feel like a reminder of the characters we're not getting fully playable this time around. Cameos are a new feature that feel like a compromise. Like, they're just there because NetherRealm couldn't make as many fighters as they wanted, and this is the compromise. That's the game in general. Just feels like a big compromise. Not a complete product like 11. It's not a terrible game. I'm not saying that, like, you should hate Mortal Kombat 1 or anything. It's actually a good game. It's just disappointing. It feels like a step back.
Sonic Boom! Sonic Boom! That might be overkill.
Brutality. Peacemaker wins.
And number 3 is Fallout. This is probably a controversial one because where does the de-evolution of the franchise start? The obvious answer is when Bethesda took over, but that's not necessarily true depending on what you're looking for in a game like this. Sure, the depth in role-playing suffered in Fallout 3, but it got a new lease on life, and like before Bethesda came in, there wasn't gonna be another Fallout. For hardcore fans, the game started to move backwards as early as Fallout 2, though. For others, it was only until Fallout 4 did they really start to lose the plot and move away from what made the series special. And even then, there's a lot of room to defend Fallout 4. The shooting is significantly better. They introduced the whole settlement system. I mean, it's not like they weren't evolving the series. The problem was that for certain fans, they were evolving the series in the wrong direction. The hardcore RPG player wants meaningful choices and complex character building mechanics. Like, they want to see real tangible changes in the world depending on those choices. And they want different dialogue stuff depending on their skills and perks. Fallout 4's streamlined dialogue system, it's kind of excessive in its simplification. Instead of being able to actually play a character, the dialogue wheel gives you such diverse options as yes and yes, but later. There's very little room for actual role-playing in the game, or bringing about different outcomes for quests, or really playing a character at all. You're looking for Sean. That's your character in Fallout 4. Is Fallout 4 a post-apocalyptic and better Heavy Rain? You decide. The entire skill system was removed in the 4th game. The faction system from New Vegas was simplified into basically being nothing. And the complexity that New Vegas brought to the Fallout series was excised for an incoherent plot that doesn't really go anywhere. And it doesn't really matter which faction you end up siding with. For people who just play Fallout to screw around in an open world, none of this matters. Doesn't matter that most of the quests boil down to go somewhere, get things, come back. For the people who just wanted to do that anyway, Fallout 76, streamlines it even more for those folks. It's not exactly a mainline entry of the series, more of a spin-off, so it gets a pass, but, for old school fans, Fallout 4 was too simplified and streamlined. A lot of people want New Vegas again, basically. That would be awesome, but with Bethesda's current release schedule, who even knows when the next Fallout game is going to actually even drop? And number 2, it's Dungeon Siege. For a series that was always meant to be a streamlined and simplified version of an RPG, it's kind of incredible how each sequel somehow managed to strip away features until there's just barely anything left. To illustrate just how much this series evolved backwards, just look at the total party size. In 1, you could have a whopping 8 party members, including your player character, and a pack mule to haul all the loot you'd be collecting. That's a big gang. Led to some pretty big battles. Managing a large party is what makes the first game so fun, too. It's linear and simple otherwise, so coordinating your group is what gives the game its depth. The sequel streamlines down to 4. That's the standard difficulty level. You can use more characters on harder difficulties all the way up to 6, so still short of the game's 8 at the series start. Dungeon Siege 3 completes the reverse evolution of the series by again reducing the party down to a piddly 2. And that's not really a true 2-person party. It's basically just Diablo, where you have the player character and a follower that helps sometimes, maybe a little. By the 3rd game, the entire tactical element of the series was gone. It was basically like a beat-em-up. There's barely even any loot to collect. Very little of the series' DNA was left by the 3rd game. Not even the setting was recognizable. It was a Dungeon Siege game in name only. They somehow managed to take an already streamlined and simplified game compared to other RPGs and take away so much it's hard to even call an RPG. And finally, at number 1, it's Castlevania. For years, the Castlevania series evolved and adapted to the changing video game landscape. At first, it was a pure evolution of games like Rondo of Blood and Symphony of the Night. Then things got more complicated with the Nintendo 64 games and the PlayStation 2 ones. The series really struggled with the translation to 3D, but soon it found a home on portable consoles like Game Boy Advance and Nintendo DS. During the Xbox 360 era, the series reached what could be considered the apex with the God of War-inspired Lords of Shadow games, which may not have been longtime series favorites, but you can't deny that Konami and developer Mercury Steam put a lot of money and effort into these games. Maybe not so much in the sequel, but either way, these were the most complex and graphically advanced games in the series. The series' slow, inevitable decline after that could be seen as a reverse evolution, but for old school fans of these games, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Sure, you could interpret what the series was with Lords of the Shadows. They had celebrity voice acting like Sir Patrick Stewart, hamming it up in a full orchestra soundtrack, cutting-edge graphics, to where we are now with the newest entry in the series being a remake for Haunted Castle buried in the latest game collection. From a blockbuster to 16-bit, with nothing else in sight, is a fall of sorts, but maybe that's not really a bad thing. I kind of think that the series was never really meant for 3D. Maybe it never needed to evolve in the first place, because Haunted Castle Revisited is actually one of the best games in the series. For a lot of fans, they're gonna like it more than any attempts to take the series into 3D. It's not a more complex game, but it is a better one. Evolving backwards isn't always a bad thing if the end result is better games. Sure, they're not exactly pushing the medium forward, but who cares? It's good. That's all for today. Leave us a comment. Let us know what you think. If you like this video, click like. If you're not subscribed, now's a great time to do so. We upload brand new videos every day of the week. Best way to see them first is, of course, a subscription, so click subscribe. Don't forget to enable notifications, and as always, we thank you very much for watching this video. I'm Falcon. You can follow me on Twitter at Falcon the Hero. We'll see you next time right here on Game Ranks.